Okay, hello and welcome back to another episode of Just a Girl from Cleveland. This is episode 132. I am recording this episode on the day after Christmas. So I hope everyone had a really enjoyable Christmas, holiday season, whatever you celebrate. And I just hope you all enjoyed some time off of work, relaxing, hopefully. I know I enjoyed eating a lot of good food over the last couple of days. So just a lot to be grateful for, and I hope you all felt that as well and just enjoyed the slower time this year. It's kind of nice when things slow down a little bit, get to spend some time with family, and you get to spend some time watching football as well, which is what I also spent a lot of time doing these last couple of days. Very enjoyable weekend of football. You had the Christmas Eve games, you had the Christmas Day game. It was all very nicely spread out throughout the weekend, which I personally really enjoyed because there was something to watch at every hour of every day. But obviously a lot to get into today. Before I get into the Browns game, just wanted to quickly thank everyone who has subscribed on YouTube, has been watching there, receiving a lot of good feedback there. So I really, really appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. It means a lot to me, and it's fun to watch it grow on a different channel. So thank you so much for doing that. Okay, so Browns Texans, obviously that's what we're all here to discuss today. The Browns officially, after their 36-22 win against the Texans, have 10 wins. Look, it's been very few times in my life that the Browns have reached 10 wins. I want to say it happened once when I was a kid and the Browns didn't make the playoffs because it was one of those weird years where 10 wins just didn't get you in. Like, usually you would think that 10 wins gets you in, but that just happened to be a year that it did not. And of course, it was the year that the Browns had 10 wins. Then we also had the Baker Mayfield year, which I believe was exactly 10 wins back in 2020. Felt like it should have been more that year, but towards the end, they were plagued with COVID for a couple games. I remember there was the one game against the Jets where the entire receiving corps was out for the game because of COVID, and it was pretty brutal. And we ended up losing that game, and it felt like that was one we should have had. Luckily, obviously, it worked out. We still made the playoffs. The rest is history there, but 10 wins is quite a feat. And I honestly, with the way everything went this season, I was not sure that was even possible. Like at the start of the season, thinking that we had a healthy defense, a healthy offensive line, a Nick Chubb, a healthy quarterback, I would say, yeah, this team should definitely win 10 games for sure. Knowing everything that happened, it seems nearly impossible that they have gotten to 10 wins with 2 games left in the season, 2 extremely winnable games with a chance to have 11 or 12 wins. I am just over the moon, excited for this team, and I'll get into it, but it really feels like the sky is the limit right now, and I don't want to hold back from where I think they can go just based on what they have proven to us week after week, that they're going to compete no matter what is working against them, whether it's injuries or weather or calls from the refs or bad bounces. Like, this team is going to be resilient and they're going to bounce back. So I'm feeling like the sky is the limit right now. Okay, so let's get into some specifics for the game before we get into some bigger picture stuff. Obviously, biggest story of the game, Amari Cooper with one of the best receiver performances I've seen in my lifetime, the best wide receiver performance for a player in a Browns uniform. He set the franchise record for most yards in a game with 265 yards. That was previously held by Josh Gordon in 2013. I think he had 261 yards. And it actually was funny because it didn't look like he was going to be able to get it because they put the backups in. We're taking a lot of the starters out of the game because the Browns were up by a decent amount at that point. Didn't feel like you wanted to risk injuring anyone. And then the Texans score kind of 2 quick touchdowns there, one recovering on the kickoff. And it was just like, you gotta, the offside kick. You just needed to get them back out there and make sure you were going to secure the win. So Amari had a chance to go back out there get to 265 yards. So exciting. He also had 2 touchdowns, and I believe he had the 2-point conversion as well. So just a really productive day for him. Shout out to anyone who was betting on Amari Cooper during this game. I'm sure you all won a lot of money, so that was the day to bet for him. And then he also had the first Browns wide receiver ever to have back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. So he had over 1,000 yards last year. This year he's already at 1,250 yards. So I'm just so excited to have him here. Still can't believe the value that we got him for. It's funny, every time someone brings up the fact that we got him for a 5th-round pick, someone has to throw out there like, but yeah, the Browns had to take his big contract on. Yeah, that contract right now looks like nothing and is worth every single penny, so I don't think the Browns feel worried in any way that they made that trade, 5th-round pick, sending it to the Cowboys, getting Amari Cooper, who has been probably over the last 2 years, overall the most productive player in your offense. I think you're going to feel pretty good about that decision that you made. So excited for him to see that stat as well. Obviously, he had the big 53-yard reception on the first play of the game to just really kick things off. And from there, it just felt like no matter what happened, I had full confidence in this team to win that game. Even when the Texans had that 98-yard kick return, I really wasn't very shaken by it. Like, I believe at the time before they scored that, the Browns were up 14-0. The kick return made it 14-7. In any other year, or honestly earlier weeks this season, that would have terrified me. But for some reason, I was just like, okay, no, that's just one roadblock in this game that this team is going to have to overcome, and they're going to do it. And that's exactly what they did. They didn't seem bothered by that at all, or it wavered their belief in who they were as a team and what they were going to be able to do on that field. So it was really impressive to see. Along with Amari Cooper, Joe Flacco had another incredible game. He threw for 368 yards and 3 touchdowns. There were the 2 interceptions, but you can live with those interceptions because of that type of yardage and that type of offensive production. If we could do that every single game, I would feel pretty good about those 2 interceptions. And I know at least one of the interceptions I remember was one of those that you feel like is kind of a punt in a way, where the field position you're giving them is nothing too incredible. So it's not like they, need 10 yards to score at that point. It wasn't a horrible, game-changing interception. So don't feel too bad about that. It was really nice after the game to see the way both Amari and Joe were speaking about each other. I feel like they formed this trust and bond and nice communication between the two of them, where they're starting to see like, okay, this guy really has it. I believe in you, and Joe's gonna, see Amari out there, and he's going to give him the ball, and know that he's going to come down with it, even in tougher situations, tight windows, tight coverages, that Amari is going to find a way. And it's really cool to see them in just a short amount of time be able to build this level of trust between each other, and just to say some like really nice things about each other. And Joe was talking about how Amari has this really incredible feel for the game and his instincts out there. So I really enjoyed watching that, and definitely hoping continues, along with the Joe and David Njoku connection, which yardage not as big this game, but also did connect in the end zone again. So very happy for them in that. On the defensive side of the ball, I thought the big standout from this game was Zadarius Smith. He had an excellent day, I would say, one of the better of his season. I think people have been maybe a little unnecessarily hard on him at certain points. Just for, he was going to come in here, be opposite of Myles Garrett, and people had, certain expectations for him. But I feel like he has been plenty productive for this defense and contributed in a nice way. Obviously, you can always do more, but I don't feel too bad about it when looking at the entirety of this defense and how they performed. Myles obviously didn't have any sacks again, but I think this goes back to what I talked about last week in the quotes from Kevin Stefanski and speaking about Myles Garrett, and how we really just have to stop focusing on sacks as a way to show how defensive linemen are producing in this league, specifically an edge rusher like Myles Garrett, who's getting double and triple teamed, constantly held on every play, and he's still getting a lot of pressures on the quarterback. In the last 3 weeks, he is leading the league in quarterback pressures with 26. So he's not sacking the quarterback, but he is certainly putting pressure on them and affecting the game in a lot of ways that aren't showing up in the big flashy stats. And I pray that when it comes to voting at the end of the season for Defensive Player of the Year, that the voters are smart enough to take those things into account, look at the entirety of the game, and understand the impact that Myles Garrett's having. That's not just a sack counter going throughout the year. He is the best defensive player on the best defense in this league, and very much, I still believe, deserves that award. And like I said, that statistic about how much he's pressuring the quarterback, I think says enough for what he does. But it was definitely good to see Za'Darius get some of those numbers and some of that actual production out there, and was happy for him. I think the most fun thing about this game, and honestly a lot of the recent games, is to watch the way Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski feel like they're finally having fun again. It felt like every time you looked at those two guys for the last, honestly, ever since they made the trade for Deshaun Watson, every time they had to speak to the media or were seen on camera, they looked like they hated their lives, honestly, that they didn't want to be there. They didn't want to be talking about whatever they had to be talking about. And I talked about this last week, but it's been really fun to see Kevin Stefanski's personality come out, the excitement that he's showing on the sidelines, in the locker room post-game, making some funny comments in his interviews with the media. Like, he made a comment to Daryl Ryder, who asked him about why they didn't have another kicker on the active roster, which anyone who knows anything about how teams manage rosters, like, people aren't keeping all of these extra kickers on their roster, like maybe on their practice squad, but you're not using up roster spots for extra kickers. And so Kevin made a comment to him like, I can't believe you have a media pass or something like that, which is such a savage thing to say, but I think it just shows how comfortable Kevin is getting, and he's confident in what he's done this season and what he's brought to the table, that he feels like he can clap back a little bit with the media members, which I think is kind of funny. And then there is the now infamous clip of Andrew Berry that's been going around of the joy on his face. I think it was after one of the Amari Cooper touchdowns. And he is clapping and cackling, giggling, looking like he's having the time of his life, and is like, finally, my master plan has come together and is working and is successful. And it just really encompasses, I think, how all of us feel this season, that are like, I can't believe this is happening. This is the best feeling in the world. This is so much fun to watch. And definitely Andrew Berry feels that way too. So the downside of this game is obviously, the downside of every week for this team is the injuries that have come from the most recent game. So this week we had some new and creative ways to have injuries in this organization. First was the backup quarterback getting injured in the game, DTR, who has now been put on IR and will be out for the season, which is such a bummer because I was really enjoying the little packages they would bring him out for and the ways that they were using him. And it was just nice to have him as a backup in case, God forbid, knock on wood, something happens to Joe Flacco, which I do not wish for that to happen. I do not want anything bad to happen to Joe Flacco, but it felt nice to have DTR, who was looking decent before he got hurt, and Joe Flacco had to step in earlier this season. So that is a huge bummer because you now have PJ Walker being moved to the active roster as the backup. I think I would like them to maybe figure out another situation for the backup quarterback, because I really do not want to have to turn to PJ Walker in a time of need to make something happen for this team. I really don't want that to be the case. So if there is someone else out there that they can go and get and at least put on the practice squad and maybe consider swapping eventually with PJ Walker there, I think that is an option that they could consider. So that was an unfortunate injury. And then the other just bizarre and strange injury that we had to deal with was special teams injuries to both the kicker and the punter. So it all started with Dustin Hopkins getting injured on the 98-yard kick return that the Texans had, where, God bless him, he was running back trying to, I don't know, was he trying to make a tackle? I'm not sure, but running full speed, and ended up injuring his hamstring, which was not ideal. You could see it happen towards the very end. And look, I appreciate the hustle. I appreciate the team mentality, the wanting to help your brothers out there on the field. But you are the kicker. Please do not do that, because you are not used to running the full length of the football field like that and then injuring your hamstring. We need you because you have been one of the most reliable parts of this team. So he is week to week right now. He is officially ruled out for the Jets game on Thursday, but he is going to be week to week from there. So I'm praying that he's at least going to be back for the playoffs. That would be the ideal situation, but you just really don't know at this point what that's going to look like. And then kind of a ripple effect from that was Corey Bojorquez, the punter, ended up having to do kickoffs because our kicker could no longer kick, and he got injured. His status is currently unclear, but the team did add a punter to the practice squad, so I'm kind of assuming that they're thinking he's at least going to be missing 1 week, and they're going to have to use this other punter. I believe this other punter has played on a couple of other different teams, and has both the punter and kicker that have been picked up have played on a couple of other teams and have actual like long-term experience in this league. So that does make me feel good that they'll be able to step in. It's not like another position where you're having to learn the entire offense. Like, you just need a leg out there for the most part. But just unreal to lose both of those guys in one game. It was hilarious to watch towards the end after they lost both of them. You had D'Anthony Bell on the sidelines warming up to kick. I believe he actually did a kickoff in the game, and it wasn't half bad, and he ran down and made the tackle on the play as well, which just really explains the Browns' identity as a whole. Like, some random safety stepping up, doing the kickoff, making the tackle on the play, next man up mentality. But God, I just don't want to have to deal with that ever again, where we have to put other guys out there to kick and to make those plays. I thought it would have been hilarious if they had Myles Garrett kick. I was kind of hoping for that in my best case scenario, but they unfortunately didn't make that happen. So that's kind of where we're at with the injuries right now, obviously on top of all of the other injuries that have taken place. I think Juan Thornhill is potentially going to be back. It seemed like there is some movement on the news about that. So we'll kind of take it day by day there and see with him. And you just hope, honestly, at this point, that during the Jets and Bengals games, you just don't lose anyone else. I think that's all you can wish for and pray for at this point, is that no one else of importance, or I mean, not even of importance, literally anyone gets hurt at this point, because you're going to need everybody in the playoffs when it comes to that, which I mean, the Browns have at this point like a 99% chance of making the playoffs. If they beat the Jets, they're 100% in. They clinch at that point. If they lose to the Jets, there's still a couple other scenarios of teams losing this coming week where the Browns can clinch. And then they have the Bengals still in week 12 with an opportunity, or not in week 12, in the last week with an opportunity to clinch and get their 12th win of the season. So that could be exciting as well if they, they just need to get one to really control their own destiny. But they don't need both at this point in order to do that, which it feels pretty good to be in that position. It's a weird place to be that I haven't really experienced in my lifetime before. So when it comes to playoffs, I'm talking playoffs because it is happening at this point. I'm not superstitious anymore. 99%, like, this team is a group of people to believe in. It's happening. There is a 94.5% chance that the Browns are going to play the winner of the AFC South, who will be the 4 seed. So it's the Jags, the Colts, or the Texans. A couple weeks ago, I thought for sure it was going to be the Jags and the 4 seed. That seemed like the most likely scenario, and then they have just ripped off a bunch of losses week after week, and are imploding right in front of everyone's faces. Trevor has another injury every single week and is continuing to play through it. And this coming week, they're playing the Panthers, which you would think should be an easy win, but the Panthers have shown like a little bit of life, even though they have only 2 wins as a team. They've shown a little bit of life, and I would be worried if I were the Jags playing the Panthers and, not for sure feeling like that's going to be a win. And then you have the Colts and Texans. I don't recall who they play this coming week, but I know that they play each other in the final week. So one of them is at least going to have another loss. And then Jacksonville has all of the tiebreakers. So most likely it's going to be Jacksonville, but I do not trust them to win this coming week. And I'm just not really sure what's going to happen with the Colts and Texans, with CJ Stroud being healthy or not, what the Colts are doing. Both of those teams lost. All 3 of those AFC South teams lost this past week. So I don't know what to say on who we're going to play. It's very much up in the air. I prefer to play the Jags because I think we have the best chance of beating the Jags. I think I'd be a little more nervous to play the Colts, who we played in a very tight game earlier this season, and the Texans with a healthy CJ Stroud, I think would be a tough team to play. Obviously, we just played the Texans, but it was the Case Keenum Texans, so it's a little bit different. So I think the most secure I would feel would be the Jags. But look, anything can happen in the playoffs, so I don't feel 100% about saying anything. Okay, so let's do a couple of mailbag questions to close out the episode. I just wrote a few down from the question box on my Instagram. And if you ever have any questions you want me to answer on the podcast, just shoot me a DM on Instagram or on Twitter, or just a comment on YouTube. If you want me to answer something any week on here, just put a question in there and I will try to get to it in this portion of the podcast. So the first one I have here is, why is Myles Garrett the MVP and stats shouldn't matter? So I think this was a question I talked a little bit about earlier in the podcast on why Myles Garrett should be Defensive Player of the Year. And I still think he honestly has an argument for MVP on the value that he brings to his team in general. I just don't think they're ever going to give it to a defensive player. And they will always give it to an offensive player for probably the rest of time. I just don't see that changing. I mentioned how he's leading the league in QB pressures in the last 3 weeks, despite, not having the sacks to be the flashy numbers. And yeah, when they say, this person says stats don't matter, like it's just, the flashy stats will never matter as much as what is happening on each play in terms of impacting what is happening on the field beyond the sacks. Like Myles still comes in there and will have a sack in a really crucial moment, in a moment that matters in a lot of games, or a really massive tackle for loss that shakes a game. But it's what he's doing on the plays where he's not even touching the quarterback, but he's getting in their face. He's shortening the amount of time that they have to throw. Like, all of those things that he's doing are really important and make things really hard on opposing quarterbacks. So I'm all for Myles Garrett MVP. I would put my vote in for that, especially considering how hard it has been this year for people to decide who should be the MVP. Why not throw Myles Garrett in the mix? Okay, the next questions I have are kind of 2 questions put together about Joe Flacco. So, will Joe Flacco be a Hall of Famer if the Browns win the Super Bowl? And 2, does he go in as a Brown if they win? I'll start with the second question. I don't think he goes in as a Brown if they win. I think he will go in as a Baltimore Raven. It was such a big part of his career. And I think he would honor them in that way, which I would honestly understand. I think they would be very upset if he went in as a Cleveland Brown after 1 season. But to answer the first part of the question, I do believe that if 38-year-old Joe Flacco wins the Cleveland Browns a Super Bowl with this banged up roster, and makes it happen, probably beating his old Baltimore Ravens along the way, that will be a Super Bowl with 2 different teams. And I think he absolutely should, in that case, be a Hall of Famer. I think, it's always a hard argument on stats versus awards and accolades like winning Super Bowls. But I think with that would have to give him a really sure argument on why he should be in. So I'm all for it, but I think he's going in as a Raven. Okay, last question I have. How far can this Browns team really go? So I've spent a lot of time thinking about this because I feel like with the Browns, my mind is always like limited. There's just always limitations in the history of this team. But when I really think through the different steps along the way, so the first round they'll have an AFC South team, which I absolutely think they can win that game and should win that game based on the level of competition they will be playing. Then the matchup from there is going to be very dependent on what the order ends up as. So probably most likely either Ravens, Dolphins, Chiefs. It could be Bills, honestly, if they win out. Like, there's so many factors at play on where the seeding is going to land based on all of these, wins and losses in these last 2 weeks and tiebreakers. Like, I just cannot tell you how things are going to land. But, I legitimately think, yes, they can beat the Ravens because they've done that already. I know it was with Deshaun Watson, but I think in general, Kevin Stefanski and this offense scheme up pretty well against AFC North opponents, and I would expect that to continue. And I just think the Ravens, they have proven they can hang with the Ravens. The Ravens are a very good team, but I just do think that they would have the ability to hang with them. The Dolphins and the Chiefs have both shown massive weaknesses throughout the season as well, and the Chiefs are, having some really low moments in recent weeks. I feel like when you watch the Dolphins, even though they're continuing to get wins, they've shown some deteriorating throughout the season, quite honestly, and have had some rougher moments. So both of those teams are extremely beatable. I think in general, the AFC is extremely up for grabs. Like, there is no team that I am sure about in any way, as sure as I was about last year's Chiefs, or there's just been teams over the years where you're like, I just feel like that team's probably going to go to at least the conference championship, if not the Super Bowl. And I don't feel that way. I think the sky is the limit. It's one game each week, so I really am not limiting this team. Like, they really could go to the Super Bowl, and that is not a crazy thing for me to say. It is very much in the realm of possibility, and I think they believe it too in that locker room. Watching what's happening around the rest of the AFC and the rest of the league, the way teams are kind of imploding down the stretch here in these final weeks, and this Browns team is coming together and still finding ways to win. I believe that they think they can do it as well. So I'm just all in. I'm riding this train all the way to the end, whatever it is. I think we're all going to have a good time. I will be at the Browns-Jets game on Thursday, hoping and praying to watch them clinch the playoffs in that stadium. It's going to be absolutely electric. I hope a lot of you will have the chance to go to. If not, we'll be able to enjoy it with some friends, watching it on TV and hopefully celebrating a great moment in Cleveland Browns history. So that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. If you could please like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, leave a review. On YouTube, please continue to subscribe, like, comment what you think of the episode. Let me know what you think the Browns' limitations are this postseason and how far you think they can go. Give me all of your thoughts, all of your questions. I'd very much appreciate it. And until next time, hopefully I'm speaking to you when the Browns have clinched. Go Browns.